The forest grew quiet as twilight settled among the ancient pines. 6-year-old Lily Morgan shivered, her bare feet bruised and dirty from hours of wandering. Her small frame trembled against the growing cold, tears having long dried on her dirt-smudged cheeks. She had been missing for nearly 2 days now, separated from her family during what should have been a simple camping trip. A wrong turn, a moment of curiosity, and suddenly the familiar paths had disappeared, leaving only endless trees stretching in every direction. Lily clutched the torn edge of her once bright yellow jacket, now stained with mud and pine sap. Her stomach ached with hunger, and her throat felt raw from calling for her parents until her voice had given out. The forest seemed to grow darker with each passing minute, shadows stretching like fingers across the forest floor. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted, the sound echoing ominously through the trees. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice barely audible even to herself. "Daddy, please find me." A twig snapped somewhere to her left. Lily froze, her heart hammering against her small chest. Something large was moving through the underbrush, coming closer with each passing second. The little girl pressed herself against the rough bark of a pine tree, trying to make herself as small as possible. Through the gathering darkness, a massive shape emerged, a mother bear, her dense brown fur catching the last rays of sunlight, stepped into the small clearing where Lily stood, paralyzed with fear. The bear's powerful muscles rippled beneath her coat as she raised her head, nostrils flaring as she caught the child's scent. Time seemed to stop. Lily remembered her father's warnings about bears, about staying away, about how dangerous they could be. Yet something in the bear's deep brown eyes held no malice as she studied the trembling child. The massive creature tilted her head slightly, as if puzzled by the small human standing before her. The bear moved forward slowly, each step deliberate. Lily wanted to run but found her legs wouldn't respond. Tears welled in her eyes again, spilling down her cheeks as the enormous animal came within feet of her. She closed her eyes, waiting for whatever would happen next. But instead of pain, Lily felt something warm and rough against her hand. She opened her eyes to find the mother bear gently sniffing her fingers, her breath warm against the child's frozen skin. The bear made a soft sound, almost like a whimper, before turning her massive head to look back into the forest, then once again at Lily. Something passed between them in that moment, a strange understanding that transcended the boundaries of species. The mother bear seemed to sense the child's fear, her hunger, her desperate loneliness. And Lily, through her terror, felt something unexpected radiating from the massive creature before her, not aggression, but a strange protective warmth. The bear stepped back, then forward again, nudging Lily gently with her nose before turning to walk a few paces into the forest. There she stopped, looking back at the child with what could only be described as expectation in her expressive eyes. She made that same soft sound again, louder this time, more insistent, and somehow, against all logic, against everything she had ever been taught about wild animals, Lily understood. The bear wasn't threatening her. She was offering help. With night falling rapidly around them and no sign of rescue, Lily took a shaky step forward, then another, following the massive creature into the deepening shadows of the forest, unsure of what would happen next, but somehow trusting this unlikely guardian that fate had sent her way. The bear led Lily deeper into the forest, moving slowly enough for the exhausted child to follow. Branches scratched at Lily's arms and face, but she pushed forward, her eyes never leaving the hulking silhouette ahead. After what seemed like hours, they arrived at the base of an enormous fallen oak tree. The massive trunk, hollowed by time and weather, created a natural shelter among its tangled roots and decaying heartwood. The mother bear ducked her head and disappeared inside. Lily hesitated, her heart racing again. What if this was a trap? What if other bears waited inside? But the bitter cold of the night was settling around her shoulders like a heavy blanket, and her body shivered uncontrollably. She had no choice. Taking a deep breath, Lily crawled into the hollow log. The interior was surprisingly warm and dry, padded with soft moss and fallen leaves. The bear's massive body radiated heat like a furnace. In the dim light filtering through cracks in the wood, Lily could make out the bear's eyes watching her carefully. Then, to her astonishment, the bear shifted, creating a space beside her massive form, and made that soft whimpering sound again. "You want me to stay here?" Lily whispered, her voice trembling. The bear blinked slowly, then lowered her head to her paws, her eyes never leaving the child. Hesitantly, Lily moved closer to the bear's warm fur. The moment she settled against the creature's side, exhaustion overtook her. The rhythmic breathing of the massive animal, the comforting warmth, and the security of the shelter lulled her into the first peaceful sleep she'd had since becoming lost. Dawn broke over the forest, pale light seeping through the cracks of the hollow tree. Lily awoke with a start, momentarily confused by her surroundings. The events of the previous day came rushing back as she felt the warm fur against her cheek. The bear was still there, still protecting her. As Lily stirred, the bear raised her head. Their eyes met once more, and the child felt that same strange connection. The bear rose slowly, careful not to disturb Lily too much, and ambled toward the entrance of their shelter. She paused there, looking back expectantly. "Are we going somewhere?" Lily asked, her voice stronger than it had been the day before. Rest had restored some of her energy, though hunger still gnawed at her stomach. Following the bear outside, Lily gasped at what awaited them. The forest in daylight was transformed. Golden sunlight filtered through the canopy. Dew sparkled on spider webs strung between branches, and birds called to one another in the treetops. Under different circumstances, she might have found it beautiful. The bear led her to a small stream, clear water bubbling over smooth stones. Lily fell to her knees beside it, cupping the cold water in her hands and drinking greedily. The bear watched patiently, then moved upstream a few yards and began to paw at the water. With a swift movement, she scooped a fish from the current and dropped it onto the bank. Lily watched in amazement as the bear caught 2 more fish, then nudged one toward her with her nose. The child stared at the still flopping fish, her hunger battling with revulsion. I can't eat it like that," she whispered, her stomach growling traitorously. The bear tilted her head, seeming to consider this problem. Then, to Lily's astonishment, she gathered dry leaves and sticks into a small pile near the fish. She looked at Lily expectantly. Understanding dawned on the little girl. "You want me to make a fire?" she asked incredulously. "But I don't know how." The bear continued to watch her, unmoving. Lily bit her lip, thinking hard. Her father had shown her how to make a fire during their camping trips, but she'd never done it alone. She searched her pockets, remembering the small metal tin her father had given her. Inside was a birthday candle, a small piece of flint, and a tiny metal striker, a survival kit, he'd called it. Mostly for fun, but just in case. With trembling fingers, Lily struck the flint against the metal, creating sparks that caught in the dry leaves. After several attempts, a small flame appeared. She carefully fed it with twigs until she had a modest fire burning. The bear watched with what almost seemed like approval in her dark eyes. Lily speared the fish on a stick and held it over the flames the way her father had taught her. The scent of cooking fish made her mouth water painfully. When it was done, she tore into it with her fingers, the hot flesh burning her tongue, but she was too hungry to care. As she ate, Lily studied her unusual companion. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, knowing the bear couldn't answer but needing to voice the question. "Where are your cubs? Don't you have a family too?" The bear's eyes seemed to grow sad at this question. She made a low, mournful sound that raised goosebumps on Lily's arms. Somehow, the child understood. This mother had lost something precious too. "You're alone," Lily whispered, a lump forming in her throat. "Just like me." After finishing her meal, Lily felt stronger. The bear led her back into the forest, occasionally stopping to dig up roots or gather berries, some of which she offered to the child. Lily accepted these gifts cautiously, eating only what she recognized from her father's lessons about edible plants. As they traveled, Lily noticed something odd. The bear seemed to be leading her in circles, never straying too far from the hollow tree shelter. By midday, they had returned to the stream, and Lily realized with a start that the bear was keeping her within a territory, protecting her, while also keeping her from wandering too far. "Are you waiting for something?" Lily asked, sitting on a sun-warmed rock by the water. "Or someone?" The bear did not respond, of course, but settled beside her, massive head resting on enormous paws. In the peaceful quiet of the afternoon, Lily began to talk. About her parents, about getting lost, about how scared she was. The words poured out of her like water from a broken dam, and though the bear couldn't understand the specifics, she seemed to sense the child's need for comfort. She moved closer, allowing Lily to lean against her side. "My mom always says everything happens for a reason," Lily murmured, her small hand buried in the bear's thick fur. "Maybe I got lost so I could find you. Maybe you needed me too." The bear made a soft rumbling sound in her chest, almost like a purr. As the sun began to set on Lily's third day in the forest, a strange tension came over her companion. The bear's ears pricked forward, her nose testing the air. She rose suddenly, nearly toppling Lily, who had been leaning against her. "What is it?" the child asked, fear creeping back into her voice. The bear stood perfectly still, her entire body alert. Then Lily heard it too, a distant cracking of branches, voices calling, human voices. "Hello!" she screamed, her voice cracking with the effort. "I'm here! Help me!" The bear growled low in her throat, backing away from the direction of the sounds. Lily looked at her, understanding and sadness washing over her. "You have to go," she whispered. "They'll hurt you if they see you with me." The bear didn't move, her eyes fixed on Lily with an intensity that stole the child's breath. "Go," Lily urged, tears welling in her eyes. "Please, I'll be okay now." The voices were growing closer, flashlight beams cutting through the gathering dusk. The bear took a step toward Lily, then another, until her massive head was level with the child's face. Gently, so gently it was barely felt, she touched her nose to Lily's cheek, a gesture so tender it broke something inside the little girl's heart. "Thank you," Lily whispered, wrapping her arms as far as they would go around the bear's neck. "I won't forget you." With one last look, the bear turned and disappeared into the forest, melting into the shadows as if she had never been there at all. "Lily, Lily Morgan." The voices were clearer now, frantic with hope and fear. "Here," Lily called back, tears streaming down her face as she waved her arms. "I'm over here." 3 rescue workers burst into the clearing, their faces flooding with relief at the sight of the small girl standing alone by the stream. They rushed forward, wrapping emergency blankets around her shoulders, checking her for injuries, radioing back to the search party that the missing child had been found alive. "Are you hurt? How did you survive out here for so long?" one of them asked, a woman with kind eyes and a gentle touch. Lily looked over her shoulder to where the bear had disappeared, then back at her rescuers. "I wasn't alone," she said simply. "I had a friend." The rescuers exchanged confused glances, but were too focused on getting the child to safety to question her further. As they led her away, Lily kept looking back, hoping for one last glimpse of her protector. "Wait," she said suddenly, pulling away from the gentle hands guiding her. She ran back to the stream, searching the ground until she found what she was looking for, a single tuft of brown fur caught on a low-hanging branch. She tucked it carefully into her pocket before allowing the rescue team to lead her away. Unknown to Lily and the rescue team, the mother bear hadn't gone far. She watched from the cover of dense bushes as the humans took her adopted cub away, a strange ache in her chest where her own cubs should have been. 2 winters ago, poachers had taken them, leaving her with nothing but an empty den and a mother's grief that no animal should have to bear. For a brief moment, she had found purpose again in protecting this lost human cub. Now, as twilight deepened around her, the forest felt emptier than it ever had before. The reunion between Lily and her parents at the edge of the national park was a blur of tears, tight embraces, and promises to never let go again. Her mother, Jessica, kept touching Lily's face as if she couldn't believe her daughter was really there, while her father, Michael, clutched her small hand so tightly it almost hurt. "We thought we'd lost you forever," Jessica sobbed, smoothing Lily's tangled hair away from her face. "When you wandered away from the campsite, the rangers said most lost children don't survive 3 nights alone in these woods," Michael added, his voice breaking. "How did you do it, sweetheart? How did you stay alive?" Lily opened her mouth to tell them about the bear, but something stopped her. The worried glances between the adults, the ranger's hand resting on his tranquilizer gun, the hushed conversations about dangerous wildlife sightings in the area. Instead, she simply said, "I found a hollow tree to sleep in, and I drank from a stream like Daddy taught me." The story satisfied the adults, who were too relieved to question further. Lily was rushed to the nearest hospital, where doctors marveled at her good condition, mild dehydration, a few scratches and bruises, but remarkably well-fed and unharmed for a child who had spent 3 days lost in the wilderness. "She's a tough little thing," the doctor told her parents. "Must have good survival instincts." Lily said nothing, but her hand kept returning to her pocket, where the tuft of brown fur remained her secret treasure. She knew no one would believe the truth. Adults rarely believed in miracles, even when they happened right before their eyes. Life gradually returned to normal. Lily went back to school, where she became something of a celebrity. Her classmates bombarded her with questions about her adventure, and Lily created a sanitized version that pleased everyone, one that didn't include a mother bear who had saved her life. But at night, alone in her room, she would take out the tuft of fur, now kept in a small glass jar on her bookshelf, and remember. Sometimes she would dream of dark, gentle eyes and the comforting warmth of fur against her cheek. She began drawing pictures, dozens of them, of a small girl and a large bear, walking side by side through a forest of towering trees. Her parents noticed the drawings, but assumed they were a way for Lily to process her traumatic experience. The child psychologist they took her to nodded approvingly, calling the bear a symbolic protector that Lily had created in her mind to cope with the fear of being alone. Only Lily knew the truth, and she held it close to her heart like the precious secret it was. 6 months passed. The Morgan family had moved on from the incident, though they no longer went camping. The trauma of almost losing their daughter had left invisible scars that would take years to heal. But for Lily's 8th birthday, Michael suggested a day trip to a different part of the national forest. A supervised visit to a ranger station with educational programs about wildlife conservation. It might be good for her, he told Jessica, to face her fears in a safe environment. Jessica wasn't convinced, but Lily surprised them by embracing the idea enthusiastically. Deep inside, though no one knew it, she harbored a secret hope of catching a glimpse of her savior again. The day of the visit dawned bright and clear. At the ranger station, Lily listened intently to the park ranger's lecture about the forest ecosystem, asking so many questions about bears that the ranger laughed. "Someone's certainly interested in our forest friends," he remarked to Michael. "Has she always been this curious about wildlife?" Michael shook his head. "It's new," he admitted. "Ever since." The ranger nodded understandingly. "Sometimes a brush with nature changes us," he said. "Opens our eyes to a bigger world." After the lecture, the family followed a guided nature trail that wound through a part of the forest deemed safe for tourists. Lily kept her eyes peeled, searching the undergrowth and scanning between trees, but there was no sign of her bear. The disappointment sat heavy in her chest. As they approached the end of the trail, a commotion near the ranger station caught their attention. A small crowd had gathered, voices raised in alarm. Michael instinctively pulled Lily closer, while Jessica moved protectively to her other side. "Stay here," Michael said, moving forward to see what was happening. He returned moments later, his face pale. "There's a bear," he said in a low voice. "A female brown bear wandered into the picnic area. The rangers are trying to tranquilize her, but she's acting strangely. Not aggressive, but not running away either." Lily's heart leaped into her throat. "Is she hurt?" she asked urgently. "I don't think so," Michael replied, surprised by his daughter's concern. "But they're worried she's becoming too comfortable around humans. That's dangerous for everyone." Before either parent could react, Lily broke free from their grasp and darted toward the commotion, her small legs carrying her faster than anyone would have thought possible. "Lily!" Jessica screamed, racing after her with Michael close behind. The scene at the picnic area was tense. 2 rangers stood with tranquilizer guns raised, while a third tried to clear the area of tourists. In the center of this chaos stood a large brown bear, seemingly unfazed by the commotion around her. She wasn't eating the abandoned picnic food or acting aggressively. Instead, she appeared to be searching for something, her massive head swinging from side to side, nostrils flaring. "Get back!" a ranger shouted as Lily burst into the clearing. "Child in the area, hold your fire!" The bear's head swung toward the sound, and her entire body went still. Dark eyes fixed on the small figure, and a low rumble emerged from her throat. "Don't move, sweetheart," a ranger called to Lily, his voice tense with fear. "Stay perfectly still while we get you out of there." But Lily wasn't afraid. A smile spread across her face as she recognized the distinctive white patch of fur on the bear's chest, a marking she had memorized during their 3 days together. "It's you," she whispered, joy bubbling up inside her. "You found me." The bear took a step forward, then another, ignoring the shouts of the rangers and the screams of onlookers. Jessica and Michael had reached the edge of the clearing, terror etched on their faces as they watched their daughter standing before the massive predator. "Lily!" Jessica screamed. "Run!" But Lily stood her ground, unafraid. The bear approached slowly, her movements deliberate and gentle, just as they had been in the forest. When she was just feet away from the child, she lowered her great head until they were eye to eye. Time seemed to stop. The rangers held their breath, fingers hovering over triggers. Parents watched in horror, certain they were about to witness a tragedy. But what happened next would become the stuff of legend in the national park. The bear gently pressed her nose against Lily's cheek, exactly as she had done the day they parted. Lily reached up without fear and placed her small hand on the bear's massive head. "I missed you too," she said, loud enough for those closest to hear. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. The senior ranger lowered his weapon slowly, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Don't shoot," he commanded. "Nobody move." The bear made a soft whimpering sound that Lily recognized immediately. The same sound she had made when offering comfort in the hollow tree. Without warning, the massive animal lowered herself to the ground, lying down before the child in what could only be described as a gesture of submission or trust. "She saved me," Lily announced, turning to face the astonished crowd. "When I was lost in the forest, she found me. She gave me food and kept me warm. She's my friend." Jessica pressed a hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face as understanding dawned. Michael stood frozen, unable to process what he was seeing. The senior ranger approached cautiously, his decades of experience useless in the face of this unprecedented situation. "Lily," he said gently, "is this true? Was this bear with you in the forest?" Lily nodded solemnly. "She protected me. She caught fish for me and showed me which berries were safe. She kept me warm at night." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small glass jar containing the tuft of fur. "See, I kept this to remember her." The ranger examined the fur, then looked back at the bear who remained calmly lying at Lily's feet, watching the proceedings with intelligent eyes. "In all my years," he murmured, shaking his head in wonder. Word spread quickly. Within hours, wildlife biologists, journalists, and curious onlookers had descended on the ranger station. The story of the bear who had saved a lost child, only to seek her out months later, captured the imagination of people far beyond the boundaries of the national forest. As experts debated the significance of the bear's behavior, some calling it maternal instinct gone awry, others suggesting a more complex emotional intelligence than previously attributed to wild animals, Lily remained at the center of the storm, telling and retelling her story to increasingly amazed audiences. The bear was not tranquilized or relocated. Instead, under the guidance of wildlife experts, an unprecedented decision was made to study this unique relationship. The bear, now nicknamed Guardian by park staff, was fitted with a tracking collar, and a special area of the forest was designated for monitored interactions, always under strict supervision and with extensive safety protocols. Scientists came from around the world to observe the remarkable bond between child and bear. They documented behaviors never before seen in wild bears, behaviors that challenged existing understandings of animal cognition and emotional capacity. For Lily, the experience transformed her life in ways she could never have imagined. The shy little girl who had once gotten lost in the woods became an impassioned advocate for wildlife conservation, especially for bears threatened by habitat loss and poaching. Her unique perspective, as perhaps the only human being who had experienced the nurturing side of a wild bear, gave her a powerful voice that people listened to. On her 10th birthday, 2 years after their reunion, Lily sat beside Guardian in their special meeting area, observed from a distance by researchers and her parents. The bear, now comfortable with these arranged visits, lay peacefully beside her human friend, as Lily read aloud from a book about bears. "Do you think she understands what I'm reading?" Lily asked one of the researchers during a break. The woman smiled. "I don't know if she understands the words, but she understands you care about her. And that's something we never knew bears could comprehend before you two showed us otherwise. As the sun began to set on that day, casting long shadows across the forest floor, Lily placed her hand on Guardian's massive paw. "Thank you for finding me," she whispered, both times. Guardian made that special rumbling sound in her chest, the one Lily had come to recognize as contentment. In that moment, surrounded by the forest they both called home in different ways, they had created something beautiful and unexpected. A bridge between two worlds that most believed could never connect. And everyone who witnessed it, from hardened scientists to skeptical rangers to Lily's once terrified parents, felt tears welling in their eyes at the simple truth before them. Love, in its purest form, knows no boundaries, not even those between species. The story of Lily and Guardian rapidly evolved from local news to international sensation. Documentary filmmakers arrived at the national park, desperate to capture footage of the extraordinary relationship. Conservation organizations used their story to raise awareness and funds for bear protection initiatives. Children's books were written, inspired by their bond, teaching young readers about empathy that transcended species. By the time Lily turned 12, 4 years after her rescue, the initial media frenzy had subsided, but the scientific studies continued. Dr. Eleanor Wright, a renowned animal behaviorist, had dedicated her career to studying Guardian and had made groundbreaking discoveries about ursine intelligence and emotional capacity. What we're observing here challenges everything we thought we knew about wild bears, Dr. Wright explained during a presentation at an international wildlife conference. Guardian displays problem-solving abilities and emotional responses previously undocumented in her species. The bond she formed with Lily suggests not just instinctual behavior, but a complex understanding of another being's needs. As fascinating as the scientific discoveries were, Lily cared less about the research and more about her connection with Guardian. Their supervised visits continued twice monthly, always carefully monitored but deeply meaningful. For Lily, these moments in the forest with Guardian had become sacred, a return to something pure and truthful in a world that had grown increasingly complicated around her. The summer that Lily turned 13 brought unexpected difficulties. Guardian's tracking collar had shown unusual movement patterns, and the bear had missed their last 2 scheduled meetings. The researchers were concerned but told Lily not to worry. Wild animals often change their routines seasonally. She might have found a new food source or expanded her territory, Dr. Wright assured her. The tracking data shows she's active and moving normally, just in a different area than usual. Lily nodded, but a sense of unease settled in her stomach. Something felt wrong. That night, she found herself unable to sleep, tossing and turning as her mind filled with images of Guardian in trouble, perhaps trapped or injured beyond the range where her collar's signal could be accurately interpreted. The next morning, Lily approached her parents at breakfast with determined eyes. "Something's wrong with Guardian," she announced. "I need to find her." Jessica and Michael exchanged concerned glances. Over the years, they had come to accept the extraordinary bond between their daughter and the bear, but they remained cautious. "Honey, Dr. Chu. Wright and her team are monitoring Guardian's movements," Jessica said gently. "If there was truly something wrong, they would know." "Technology isn't perfect," Lily insisted. "Guardian wouldn't just disappear without a reason. She's trying to tell us something." Michael sighed, setting down his coffee cup. "Lily, I understand you're worried, but you can't just wander into the forest looking for a wild bear, even Guardian." "Then come with me," Lily pleaded. "We could check the areas where the tracking data showed she was last active, just to make sure." After hours of discussion and several phone calls to the research team, a compromise was reached. A small expedition would be organized. Dr. Wright, 2 research assistants, a park ranger, Michael, and Lily would investigate the area where Guardian's signal had last been strongest. The following day dawned clear and warm as the group set out, equipped with tracking devices, first aid supplies, and enough provisions for a full day's hike. Lily's heart pounded with equal parts anticipation and fear. What if something terrible had happened to Guardian? What if she was too late? The expedition moved deeper into the forest, following the coordinates from Guardian's tracking collar. By midday, they had reached the general area where the bear had last been detected, but there was no sign of her. The signal's been stationary in this region for almost 3 days, Dr. Wright explained, studying her handheld GPS device. That's unusual for Guardian. She typically covers several miles daily. The group spread out within visual contact of each other, searching for any signs of the bear, tracks, scat, broken branches, anything that might indicate her presence or direction of travel. Lily moved with purpose, her eyes scanning the forest floor with an intensity that surprised even the experienced researchers. It was Lily who found the first clue, a tuft of brown fur caught on a low branch, identical to the one she had kept in her glass jar for years. "She was here," she called out, bringing the others running. Dr. Wright examined the fur and nodded. "It's fresh, not more than a day or 2 old." They followed a faint trail that would have been invisible to less experienced eyes, subtle signs of a large animal's passage through the underbrush. The trail led them to a small stream where clear bear tracks were visible in the mud. "She came here to drink," the ranger said, kneeling to examine the prints. "And then—" His voice trailed off as his eyes followed the tracks to the opposite bank. "That's odd. What is it?" Lily asked, moving closer. The ranger pointed to a set of human footprints that intersected with Guardian's tracks. "Someone else has been here. Multiple people, actually." A chill ran down Lily's spine. Her mind flashed back to what the bear had communicated to her years ago, the loss of her cubs to poachers. "We need to hurry," she whispered. The group continued following the mixed tracks, the mood growing tenser with each passing minute. The trail led them deeper into a part of the forest that was outside the usual research area, approaching the boundaries of the national park. As they crested a small ridge, the ranger suddenly raised his hand, signaling everyone to stop. He pointed silently to a thin column of smoke rising from a clearing about half a mile ahead. "That shouldn't be there," he said in a low voice. "There are no authorized campsites in this area." They approached cautiously, staying within the cover of the trees. The smoke came from a small crude campsite where 3 men moved about, loading equipment into an off-road vehicle partially hidden under camouflage netting. Near the vehicle was a large metal cage, and inside— "Guardian!" Lily gasped, her heart freezing in her chest. The magnificent bear paced restlessly in the confines of the cage, which was barely large enough for her to turn around. Even from this distance, Lily could see that something was wrong. Guardian's movements were sluggish, uncoordinated, as if she had been drugged. "Poachers," Dr. Wright whispered, her face pale with anger. "They've trapped her." The ranger was already on his radio, calling for backup, but help would take time to arrive. Meanwhile, the men were preparing to leave, the engine of their vehicle now running. "They're going to take her," Lily said, panic rising in her throat. "We can't wait for backup." Michael gripped his daughter's shoulders. "Lily, those men are dangerous. We need to let the authorities handle this." But Lily's eyes remained fixed on Guardian, remembering how the bear had not hesitated to protect her when she was vulnerable and alone. "She saved my life," she said quietly. "I have to try." Before anyone could stop her, Lily stepped out from the cover of the trees and walked steadily toward the campsite, ignoring the frantic whispers behind her. "Hey!" she called out, her voice ringing clear in the forest clearing. "That's my bear!" The three men froze, startled by the sudden appearance of a young girl. Their momentary confusion gave the rest of Lily's group time to emerge from the trees, the ranger with his hand on his service weapon. "National Park Service," the ranger announced firmly. "Step away from the vehicle and the cage." What followed was a tense standoff. The poachers, realizing they were outnumbered but not willing to surrender their valuable prize, made threats and arguments. They claimed they had permits for capturing wildlife, that they were animal handlers for a zoo, that this was all a misunderstanding. While the adults were engaged in this confrontation, Lily edged closer to the cage. Guardian's eyes, though dulled by whatever drugs the poachers had used, fixed on her with unmistakable recognition. The bear made a soft whimpering sound, pressing her nose against the bars. "I'm here," Lily whispered. "I'm going to get you out." She examined the cage, finding a heavy padlock securing the door. The key would be with one of the poachers, but there was no way to get it without escalating the already dangerous situation. Lily's mind raced, seeking a solution. Then she noticed something. The cage, while sturdy, had been hastily assembled. One of the panels was attached to the frame with simple bolts that had been inadequately tightened. If she could loosen them further. Lily glanced back at the confrontation. Everyone's attention was focused on the standoff, no one noticing as she slipped around to the side of the cage and began working on the loose bolts with her fingers. Guardian seemed to understand what she was doing and remained quiet, watching Lily with those intelligent eyes. The bolts were stubborn, but Lily's determination was stronger. One by one, they yielded to her persistent effort. Just as she removed the final bolt, a shout from behind indicated that one of the poachers had noticed her activity. "The kid! She's freeing the bear!" Everything happened at once. The poachers lunged toward Lily. The ranger and research team moved to intercept them, and Michael ran toward his daughter with fear etched on his face. In the chaos, Lily pulled the loosened panel away, creating an opening just large enough for Guardian to squeeze through. "Go," she urged the bear. "Run!" For a heart-stopping moment, Guardian didn't move, still affected by the sedative. Then, with what seemed like tremendous effort, she pushed her massive body through the opening and stumbled into the clearing. What happened next would later be debated extensively among witnesses, each with a slightly different recollection of the extraordinary sequence of events, but all would agree on the fundamental facts. Instead of fleeing into the forest as everyone expected, Guardian positioned herself between Lily and the approaching threat. Despite her drugged state, the bear rose to her full height, an imposing wall of fur and muscle, and let out a roar that seemed to shake the very trees around them. The poachers froze in terror. The researchers and rangers stared in awe. And Michael, who had been running to protect his daughter, stopped in his tracks as he witnessed firsthand the truth he had been told but never fully grasped. This wild animal was prepared to defend Lily with her life. In that frozen moment, sirens wailed in the distance. Park rangers and local police were approaching, summoned by the earlier radio call. The poachers, realizing their situation was hopeless, abandoned their confrontational stance. Within minutes, additional rangers arrived, quickly taking control of the scene and placing the poachers under arrest. As the authorities secured the area, Lily approached Guardian, who had lowered herself to the ground, clearly exhausted from the effort of her protective display. The bear's breathing was labored, her magnificent body betraying the effects of whatever drugs had been used to capture her. Dr. Wright hurried over with her medical kit. "She needs help," she said urgently. The tranquilizer they used could be dangerous in high doses. What followed was a frantic effort to save Guardian's life. A veterinary team was helicoptered in, setting up an emergency treatment station right there in the forest clearing. For hours, they worked to flush the drugs from the bear's system, monitoring her vital signs and administering counteractive medications. Lily refused to leave Guardian's side, holding a vigil that stretched through the day and into the night. As darkness fell, portable lights were set up around the makeshift medical station, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The poachers' equipment revealed their intentions. Guardian had been destined for an illegal wildlife trading operation that specialized in supplying live specimens to private collectors and disreputable zoos overseas. She would have disappeared forever, Dr. Wright told Michael and Jessica as they watched the veterinary team work. These operations are sophisticated and ruthless. Once an animal enters that network, they're virtually untraceable. As midnight approached, Guardian's condition remained critical. The lead veterinarian, Dr. Chen, approached Lily with a grave expression. "We've done everything we can," she said gently. "Now, it's up to her. Bears are strong, but the combination of drugs they used was particularly potent." Lily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Can I stay with her?" she asked. Dr. Chen hesitated, then nodded. "I think that would be good. She seems calmer when you're near." Through the long night, Lily sat beside Guardian's massive form, her small hand resting on the bear's chest, feeling each labored breath. She talked continuously in a low voice, reminding Guardian of their time together in the forest, of the fish they had caught, of the warm safety of the hollow tree. "You didn't give up on me," she whispered. "Don't give up now." As dawn broke over the forest, casting golden light through the trees, Guardian's breathing changed. It became more regular, stronger. Her eyes, which had remained closed throughout the night, flickered open. They found Lily immediately, and in them was a clarity that had been absent since her rescue. Dr. Chen, who had been monitoring the bear's vital signs, broke into a tired smile. "Her readings are improving," she announced. "I think she's going to make it." A cheer went up from the assembled team, researchers, rangers, and veterinarians who had worked through the night to save this remarkable animal. Lily buried her face in Guardian's fur, her tears now of relief rather than fear. The recovery process would be slow. Guardian was transported to a specialized wildlife rehabilitation facility within the national park, a secure enclosure where she could heal under constant supervision while remaining in her familiar forest environment. The story of her rescue from poachers and Lily's role in it made headlines around the world, bringing renewed attention to their extraordinary bond and to the urgent issues of wildlife trafficking and bear conservation. During Guardian's recovery, something unexpected happened. The investigation into the poaching operation led authorities to a private compound just outside the national park boundaries. There, they discovered something that changed everything. 2 young bears, approximately 2 years old, confined in separate cages. DNA testing would later confirm what some had already begun to suspect. These were Guardian's cubs, stolen years ago but kept alive as valuable breeding stock for the illegal wildlife trade. When Lily heard the news, she sat down in shock, the pieces falling into place. "That's why she helped me," she whispered. She recognized another lost child. The reunion between Guardian and her cubs was approached with caution by the wildlife team. No one knew how the bears would react to each other after years of separation, or if Guardian would even recognize her offspring, now nearly grown. The day of the reunion was clear and cool. Guardian, now fully recovered from her ordeal, had been moved to a large, natural enclosure within the rehabilitation center. The cubs, still wary and distrustful after their years in captivity, were slowly introduced to the same space, with barriers that could be removed when the team deemed it safe. Lily watched from an observation platform with Dr. Wright, her parents, and the rehabilitation team. Her heart pounded as the barriers were lifted, allowing the three bears to see each other for the first time. There was a moment of absolute stillness. Guardian raised her head, testing the air with flared nostrils. The two younger bears froze, uncertain. Then Guardian made a sound. A soft, rumbling call that seemed to vibrate through the air. One of the cubs took a hesitant step forward, then another. The second followed. Guardian remained still, waiting. When they were just feet away, she extended her muzzle toward them, sniffing carefully. Something passed between them, some recognition, some memory of a bond formed years ago. The larger of the two cubs made a sound almost identical to Guardian's call. Then, in a movement that brought tears to the eyes of every human observer, Guardian gently nuzzled each cub in turn, her massive head moving with infinite tenderness against their smaller forms. "She knows them," Dr. Wright whispered, her scientific objectivity momentarily abandoned in the face of this miracle. After all this time, she still knows her cubs. The rehabilitation team had prepared for various outcomes, including the possibility that the family might not reconnect. Instead, they witnessed something that defied expectation: the reformation of a family torn apart by human greed, a healing that few had dared to hope for. In the days that followed, Guardian and her cubs began the process of becoming a family again. The younger bears, initially wary after years of mistreatment, gradually accepted their mother's presence. Guardian displayed remarkable patience, giving them space when needed but always remaining close, as if afraid they might disappear again. For Lily, witnessing this reunion was both joyful and bittersweet. She understood now why Guardian had been drawn to her in the forest, a mother who had lost her children finding a child who had lost her way. Their bond had been forged in mutual need, in recognition of something vulnerable that demanded protection. Now, with her family restored, would Guardian still need their special connection? Dr. Wright sensed Lily's conflicted emotions and sat with her one afternoon as they watched the bears from a distance. "You know," she said gently, "you'll always be part of Guardian's story. You saved each other. That doesn't go away, even if things change." Lily nodded, blinking back tears. "I want her to be happy," she said. "She deserves to have her family back." The conservation team faced a difficult decision regarding the bear's future. Guardian had become habituated to human presence through her interactions with Lily and the research team. Her cubs, raised in captivity, had never learned the skills needed to survive in the wild. Simply releasing them back into the forest could be disastrous. After extensive consultation with wildlife experts from around the world, an unprecedented solution was proposed. A large, protected sanctuary would be established within the national forest. Thousands of acres of natural habitat, securely bordered to prevent poaching, where Guardian and her cubs could live in safety while maintaining their wild nature. A research and education center would be built at the edge of the sanctuary, allowing continued study and controlled visits while minimizing human interference in the bears' lives. The proposal generated controversy. Some conservationists argued that any continued human contact was inappropriate for wild animals. Others pointed to the unique circumstances of this case and the valuable research opportunities it presented. Ultimately, the decision came down to what would best serve both the bears and the broader goals of conservation education. 2 years later, on Lily's 15th birthday, the sanctuary was officially opened. Now, a poised young woman with a passionate interest in wildlife biology, Lily stood beside her parents and Dr. Wright as the ribbon was cut on the Guardian Bear Sanctuary and Research Center. Journalists and dignitaries crowded around, eager to capture the moment when the remarkable story of a lost child and a mother bear came full circle. "None of this would have happened without you, Lily," Dr. Wright said, as they looked out over the expanse of protected forest that would be Guardian's permanent home. "You changed how people see these animals, how they understand what's worth protecting." In the distance, just visible through binoculars, Guardian and her now fully grown cubs could be seen foraging near a stream. A family restored, living as nature intended, yet forever connected to the human world through one extraordinary relationship. Lily smiled, her hand instinctively touching the small locket she wore around her neck, a tiny glass vial containing that first tuft of fur she had collected years ago. "I still visit her, you know," she said quietly. "Not as often, now that she has her family back. But sometimes when it's just the two of us, it feels exactly like it did in that hollow tree. Like we understand each other perfectly." Dr. Wright nodded. "Some bonds transcend our understanding," she said. "They remind us that there's more connecting us to the natural world than we can explain through science alone." As the sun began to set over the sanctuary, casting long golden rays through the trees, Lily thought about the long, strange journey that had brought them all to this moment. A simple wrong turn in the forest had set in motion events that transformed not only her life, but countless others. Researchers who discovered new dimensions of animal intelligence, conservationists who gained powerful new tools for advocacy, and ordinary people around the world who were moved to tears by the story of a bear who saved a child, only to be saved in return. Guardian's story had begun in loss and loneliness, as had Lily's brief but terrifying ordeal in the forest. Yet, through that darkness, they had found each other, forging a connection that defied conventional understanding and opened new possibilities for harmony between humans and the wild creatures with whom they share the earth. As twilight deepened and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Lily made a silent promise. To Guardian, to herself, and to the wild world that had brought them together. She would dedicate her life to protecting these connections, to helping others understand that the boundaries between species were more permeable than anyone had imagined, and that in those rare, precious moments when those boundaries dissolved entirely, something miraculous could emerge, something that could change the world, one heart at a time. Years later, Dr. Lily Morgan would stand before an international assembly of wildlife conservationists, her groundbreaking research on ursine cognition and emotional intelligence having revolutionized how humanity understood and protected these magnificent creatures. Sanctuaries modeled after Guardians had been established worldwide, creating safe havens where endangered bears could thrive while contributing to our understanding of their complex inner lives. In the front row of the audience sat an elderly doctor. Wright, now retired, but still passionate about the work she had helped pioneer. Beside her were Lily's parents, their hair now gray, but their eyes still bright with pride as they watched their daughter accept the prestigious Global Conservation Medal. As Lily approached the podium, a hush fell over the assembly. She looked out at the faces before her, scientists, activists, policymakers, all united in their commitment to protecting the natural world, and thought of how far they had come since that day when a lost child and a bereaved mother bear had found each other in a forest. "My journey began with fear," she told them, her voice steady and clear. A child alone in the wilderness, certain that nature was something to be feared. But what I discovered instead was that the natural world isn't separate from us at all. It's part of us, as we are part of it. The boundaries we create are illusions, necessary sometimes, but illusions nonetheless. On the large screen behind her appeared a photo. Guardian in her sanctuary, now elderly herself but still magnificent, surrounded by her extended family. 3 generations of bears, all descended from the mother who had once saved a human child, all living in safety because of that singular act of compassion. Guardian taught me that love transcends species, Lily continued. That understanding can bridge even the widest divides. Each of us carries that potential within us, to reach across the boundaries that separate us from other beings, to recognize ourselves in their eyes, and to protect what we have come to love. She touched the locket that still hung around her neck, containing that small tuft of fur collected so many years ago. This journey that began with a child and a bear has become something much larger than either of us. It has become a movement, a new way of seeing our place in the natural world. As she spoke these words, somewhere in a protected forest sanctuary, an aging bear raised her head as if listening to a distant call. Though the human child she had once protected was no longer a child, and the bond between them had evolved over the decades, something essential remained unchanged. A connection formed in a moment of mutual need that had grown into something powerful enough to change not just 2 lives, but countless others. In that connection lay hope for a world where humans and wildlife could coexist not as adversaries, but as stewards and beneficiaries of a shared planet. A world where a lost child could find protection in the unlikely embrace of a wild creature, and where that embrace could remind humanity of a simple truth too often forgotten, that compassion knows no boundaries, not even those between species. And that, in the end, is what brought tears to everyone's eyes. The applause following Dr. Lily Morgan's speech lasted nearly 5 minutes. A standing ovation that acknowledged not just her scientific contributions but the remarkable journey that had brought her to this moment. As she made her way back to her seat, hands reached out to touch her arm, to make some small connection with the woman whose story had inspired conservation efforts around the world. But even as Lily accepted their admiration with gracious smiles, her mind was elsewhere. The celebration would continue with a gala dinner, but she had arranged for a helicopter to take her back to the sanctuary immediately after her speech. Guardian had been showing signs of age in recent months, moving more slowly, sleeping more often, eating less. At 22, she was well beyond the average lifespan of a wild brown bear, and Lily knew their time together was growing short. As the helicopter descended toward the sanctuary's research center, Lily gazed out at the vast protected forest below. What had begun as a special enclosure for 3 bears had expanded over the years into a 50,000-acre conservation area, home to dozens of rescued bears and other wildlife. The research conducted here had revolutionized understanding of bear cognition, social structures, and emotional lives. Dr. Evan Chen, the sanctuary's head veterinarian and Lily's husband of 8 years, was waiting when the helicopter landed. His face, usually animated and cheerful, was solemn as he greeted her. "How is she?" Lily asked, her voice catching slightly. Evan took her hand. "She's hanging on," he said gently. "She hasn't eaten since yesterday, but she seemed to perk up when I told her you were coming." He smiled slightly at his own words. Once, such anthropomorphism would have been considered unprofessional, but Guardian had changed those rules long ago. They drove in an electric cart along the winding path that led deep into the sanctuary. Over the years, Guardian had been granted increasing freedom within the protected area, but as her health declined, she had chosen to remain close to a particular clearing near a stream, a place reminiscent of where she and Lily had first found each other so many years ago. "The cubs are with her," Evan said as they drove. "Not cubs anymore, of course, but they seem to understand something's happening. They haven't left her side all day." Lily nodded, fighting back tears. Guardian's cubs, now massive adult bears in their late teens, had grown into magnificent creatures. They had produced cubs of their own, creating a lineage that now included 8 grand cubs and even 4 great-grand cubs. Unlike Guardian, they had never formed close bonds with humans, remaining appropriately wild despite their sanctuary upbringing. But they had maintained a strong family connection, unusual in bears outside of mother-cub relationships. The cart stopped at the edge of a meadow filled with wildflowers. In the center, beneath the spreading branches of an ancient oak, lay Guardian. Her once glossy brown fur was now streaked with gray, her powerful body diminished by age, but to Lily she was still the most beautiful creature she had ever seen. Around Guardian, maintaining a respectful distance but clearly keeping watch, were her 2 adult offspring and several younger bears, a multi-generational family gathering that defied conventional understanding of bear behavior. "I'll wait here," Evan said softly. "Take all the time you need." Lily approached slowly, her heart heavy with the knowledge of what was coming, but full of gratitude for this final chance to say goodbye. As she drew near, Guardian's head lifted slightly, her nose testing the air. Even with diminished senses, she recognized Lily's scent immediately. A soft rumble emanated from her chest, that same special sound she had made when they huddled together in the hollow tree decades ago. "Hello, old friend," Lily whispered, kneeling beside the massive bear. The other bears shifted nervously at her approach, but didn't retreat. Over the years, they had grown accustomed to Lily's presence in their matriarch's life, accepting her as some strange but important part of their extended family structure. Lily placed a gentle hand on Guardian's head, feeling the coarse fur beneath her fingers. The bear's eyes, clouded now with age but still expressing that remarkable intelligence, fixed on her face. They held no fear, no confusion, only a serene recognition. For hours, Lily sat beside Guardian as the afternoon light gradually softened into evening. She spoke softly, reminiscing about their shared journey. The frightened child and bereaved mother who had found each other in the wilderness, the dramatic rescue from poachers, the joyful reunion with long-lost cubs, and all that had followed. Guardian listened, her breathing labored but steady, occasionally making that special rumbling sound that had always been reserved for Lily alone. As twilight deepened, the other bears grew restless, some moving away to forage before night fell completely. But Guardian's 2 adult offspring remained, keeping a respectful distance but clearly unwilling to leave their mother. "They're waiting for you to go," came Evan's quiet voice from behind her. He had approached silently, medical bag in hand. Bears typically prefer to die alone, away from their family groups. Lily nodded, tears streaming freely down her face now. "But she's waiting for my permission," she whispered. "After all these years, she's still protecting me. Even from this." With infinite tenderness, Lily leaned close to Guardian's ear. "It's okay," she murmured. "You can rest now. You've done so much, given so much. Your family is safe. They'll always be protected here." Guardian's eyes held hers for a long moment. Then, with what seemed like tremendous effort, the bear raised her massive head and gently, so gently, pressed her nose against Lily's cheek, exactly as she had done the day they parted in the forest and again when they reunited at the ranger station. A perfect circle completed. Lily stood, her legs unsteady. "I'll come back in the morning," she said to Evan, though they both understood what would likely happen during the night. As they walked back to the cart, Lily glanced over her shoulder one last time. Guardian's adult offspring had moved closer to their mother, one on each side, their massive forms creating a protective barrier around her. In that moment, Lily understood that Guardian had not just changed her life, or even the field of bear conservation. She had changed how bears themselves could live, creating new patterns of family connection that might be passed down through generations. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Lily and Evan returned to the meadow as the first light touched the ancient oak. Guardian lay exactly where they had left her, but the stillness of her massive form told them everything before they even approached. During the night, surrounded by her family yet granted the privacy of her final moments, the remarkable bear had slipped away. Her offspring had already left, following the natural bear custom of moving on after death. They would continue their lives in the sanctuary, carrying Guardian's genetic legacy, and perhaps something more, the capacity for bonds that transcended typical bear behavior. A team from the sanctuary arrived to transport Guardian's body with dignity and respect. According to the protocols Lily had established years earlier, a complete scientific examination would be conducted, contributing final insights to the wealth of knowledge this extraordinary animal had already provided. Then, Guardian would be laid to rest in a private ceremony at a special site within the sanctuary, attended only by those who had known her best. News of Guardian's passing spread quickly through conservation circles and then to the broader public. Messages of condolence poured in from around the world, from scientists whose careers had been shaped by Guardian's story, from children who had grown up reading about the bear who adopted a human child, from ordinary people who had been moved by this remarkable testament to cross-species connection. In the days that followed, as Lily moved through the necessary tasks of grief, something unexpected began to happen at the sanctuary's visitor center. People started arriving, hundreds, then thousands of them, bringing flowers, drawings, letters, and small carved bears to create an impromptu memorial. They came not just from nearby communities, but from across the country and around the world, many having saved for years to make the pilgrimage. Watching from her office window, Lily was astonished by the outpouring. "I never realized how many lives she touched," she said to Evan as they observed the quiet, respectful crowd. "Your story together gave people something they desperately need," Evan replied. "Hope that we can find ways to coexist with the natural world. That difference doesn't have to mean division." A week after Guardian's passing, as Lily was reviewing data in her office, a sanctuary ranger knocked urgently on her door. "Dr. Morgan," he said, slightly out of breath, "there's something you need to see." He led her to one of the observation platforms overlooking a remote section of the sanctuary. Through high-powered binoculars, Lily observed an extraordinary scene. Guardian's 2 adult offspring, now the elders of their family group, were leading their own cubs and grandcubs in what appeared to be a deliberate patrol of the sanctuary boundaries, the exact route that Guardian had established years ago when the protected area was first created. "They've been doing this every day since she passed," the ranger explained. "It's like they're continuing her work." The implications were staggering. Guardian had not just formed bonds with her direct offspring, but had somehow transmitted behaviors, complex, protective behaviors that served the entire family group. It suggested a level of cultural transmission previously undocumented in bears. "We need to adjust our research protocols," Lily said, her scientific mind engaging despite her grief. "Long-term behavioral studies, multi-generational tracking. If they're passing down learned behaviors rather than just instinctual ones." She trailed off, her eyes fixed on the distant bears as they moved methodically along the boundary, occasionally stopping to scent mark or observe their surroundings. In their movements, she could see echoes of Guardian, the same deliberate pace, the same attentiveness. Something of her lived on in them, not just genetically but behaviorally, perhaps even emotionally. That night, unable to sleep, Lily wandered out onto the deck of the small cabin she and Evan shared on sanctuary grounds. The star-filled sky stretched overhead. The same stars that had witnessed her rescue by a grieving mother bear all those years ago. The same stars that had watched over Guardian's reunion with her cubs, her years of peaceful existence in the sanctuary, and finally her peaceful passing surrounded by family. A soft noise from the edge of the clearing caught Lily's attention. There, partially obscured by shadow but unmistakable in the moonlight, stood a young female bear, one of Guardian's grand cubs now about 3 years old. The bear observed Lily with curious eyes, showing neither fear nor aggression, simply interest. Lily remained perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. Direct encounters with the younger generations of a Guardian's family were rare. They maintained a healthy wariness of humans, exactly as they should. For a long moment, human and bear regarded each other across the clearing. Then, with deliberate movements, the young bear approached a berry bush at the forest edge, carefully selected a cluster of ripe berries, and placed them on the ground in full view of Lily. Meeting her eyes once more, the bear backed away to the edge of the clearing before disappearing into the forest. Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks as she understood the significance of what she had just witnessed. Not a domesticated behavior or an expectation of reward, but a deliberate act of connection, a recognition of shared history and perhaps shared grief. The following morning, Lily called an emergency meeting of the sanctuary's scientific team. "We need to reconsider everything we thought we knew," she told them, describing what she had observed. Guardian's legacy isn't just in conservation policy or scientific discovery. It's alive in her descendants, in behaviors and capacities. We're only beginning to understand. Over the months and years that followed, as Lily moved through her grief into a new chapter of research and discovery, the sanctuary continued to yield remarkable insights. Guardian's family group developed complex social structures unlike any previously documented in bears. They maintained territories collaboratively, shared food resources during scarcity, and even appeared to teach younger bears specific skills like fishing techniques and food identification. Most remarkable of all was their continued acknowledgement of human boundaries, not through fear, but through what seemed like mutual respect. They never approached human structures aggressively, never attempted to raid food storage, and maintained a careful distance from visitors while still allowing themselves to be observed for research purposes. 5 years after Guardian's passing, on the anniversary of her death, Lily stood alone in the meadow where her old friend had taken her final breaths. The ancient oak had been struck by lightning the previous summer. Its massive trunk split down the middle but still standing. New growth already sprouting from the damaged wood, death and renewal intertwined. As she placed a small bouquet of wildflowers at the base of the tree, a movement at the forest edge caught her eye. A mother bear emerged from the shadows, 2 small cubs tumbling playfully behind her. With a start, Lily recognized the adult female, the same bear who had left berries for her years earlier, now grown into maturity with cubs of her own. The mother bear paused, watching Lily with those intelligent eyes that so resembled Guardian's. Then, to Lily's astonishment, she made a sound. Not quite the same as Guardian's special rumble, but remarkably similar. A greeting, perhaps, or an acknowledgement. One of the cubs, bolder than its sibling, took a few curious steps toward Lily before its mother gently herded it back with a nudge of her massive head. Not fear, Lily realized, but appropriate caution, teaching boundaries while acknowledging connection. As the small family disappeared back into the forest, Lily felt something shift within her, a healing she hadn't realized she still needed. Guardian was truly gone, but what they had created together lived on. In the protected forest around her, in the scientific understanding that had revolutionized bear conservation worldwide, in the generations of bears who carried not just Guardian's genes, but perhaps something of her unique capacity for connection. That evening, as Lily prepared for bed, she received a call from the sanctuary's security team. A young girl had been caught trying to sneak into the restricted area after hours. A teenager, maybe 15 or 16, who had traveled alone from across the country. "She says she needs to speak with you specifically, Doctor. Morgan," the security officer explained, "says it's about Guardian." Intrigued, despite her weariness, Lily asked them to bring the girl to her office. 20 minutes later, a slender teenager with determined eyes and a backpack covered in environmental cause buttons sat across from her, nervously twisting her hands. "My name is Emma," she said without preamble. "Emma Hayes. My grandmother was Jessica Morgan, your mother." Lily stared at the girl in shock. Her mother had passed away 10 years earlier, and though she had maintained a close relationship with her father until his death 5 years ago, she had lost touch with her extended family, especially after dedicating herself fully to the sanctuary work. "That would make you my cousin's daughter?" Lily asked, trying to work out the relationship. Emma nodded. "My dad is your cousin Ryan, but that's not why I'm here." She reached into her backpack and carefully removed an old, battered journal bound in faded leather. "When my grandmother died, this was among her things. It was meant for you, but no one knew how to reach you. You were on a research expedition in Russia when she passed." With trembling hands, Lily accepted the journal. Opening it, she recognized her mother's handwriting immediately. The entries began the day after Lily had been rescued from the forest and continued for years afterward. "She documented everything," Emma explained. "All the little things you told her about your time with Guardian that you didn't share with the scientists or the media. The private moments, the details that seemed too incredible for anyone to believe." Lily turned pages slowly, tears welling in her eyes as she read her mother's careful documentation of those early days. A frightened child insisting that a bear had protected her. Details that matched precisely with what researchers would later confirm about bear behavior. Insights that anticipated scientific discoveries by decades. "My grandmother believed you," Emma said softly. "From the very beginning, even when others thought you were just a traumatized child, creating a fantasy to cope with your ordeal. She kept these records because she knew someday they would matter, that someday science would catch up to what you already knew." Wiping tears from her cheeks, Lily looked up at this young relative she hadn't known existed. "Why bring this to me now?" Emma's eyes, so like Lily's own, held a familiar determination. "Because I want to work here," she said simply. "I've been following your research since I was old enough to read. I'm starting college next year, environmental science and wildlife behavior. I want to continue what you started." Looking at this young woman, family she hadn't known she still had, a continuation of her own legacy as surely as Guardian's descendants continued hers, Lily felt a circle completing. The story that had begun with a lost child and a grieving mother bear had grown beyond either of them, touching lives and inspiring connections they could never have imagined. "Guardian would have liked you," Lily said with a smile, offering her hand to her young relative. She always recognized a kindred spirit. That night, as a new moon cast the sanctuary into velvety darkness, Lily sat on her deck reading her mother's journal by the light of a small lamp. Each entry revealed a mother's love and concern, her struggle to understand her daughter's extraordinary experience, and her gradual acceptance that something miraculous had indeed occurred in that forest, something that defied conventional understanding, but was no less real for its inexplicability. The final entry, dated just weeks before Jessica's death, read, Lily has created something beautiful from what could have been only tragedy. She transformed fear into understanding, separation into connection. What Guardian began by saving my daughter's life, Lily continues by saving the lives of countless bears. Some might call it repayment of a debt, but I see it differently. I see it as love, pure and simple. Love that transcends boundaries we once thought impermeable. And in a world that so often feels fractured and divided, what greater gift could there be? Closing the journal, Lily gazed out at the sanctuary that had become her life's work. Somewhere in the darkness, Guardian's descendants moved through their world, a world made safer through the unlikely bond between a child and a bear. Their story had not ended with Guardian's passing, or even with the scientific revelations that followed. It continued in expanding circles of influence, touching lives human and animal alike, creating possibilities that had never before existed. In the distance, a bear called out, a low, rumbling sound that carried through the night air. Another answered, then another, voices joining in what researchers had come to call a family chorus, a behavior unique to Guardian's lineage. The sound wrapped around Lily like an embrace, familiar and wild all at once, a reminder of all that had been and all that was yet to come. Tomorrow, she would begin teaching Emma about the sanctuary's work. Tomorrow, she would continue analyzing the remarkable data on Guardian's descendants. Tomorrow, she would speak with donors about expanding the protected area to create safe corridors connecting to other wilderness reserves. But tonight, she simply listened to the bears calling to one another across the darkness. Voices that existed because one bear had once looked at a lost child and chosen compassion over fear. Voices that carried forward a legacy of connection that had, indeed, brought tears to everyone's eyes and in doing so, helped heal a small but significant rift in the fragile relationship between humanity and the natural world. As she finally rose to go inside, Lily whispered the words that had become both her scientific conclusion and her personal mantra. Boundaries are more permeable than we know, and in that permeability lies our greatest hope. The Guardian Bear Sanctuary celebrated its 30th anniversary with the opening of a new research wing dedicated to interspecies communication and cognition. Scientists from around the world gathered to share their findings, many of them inspired by the groundbreaking work that had begun with one bear's unexpected adoption of a human child. Dr. Lily Morgan, now in her 70s but still sharp-minded and passionate, stood beside her protege and distant relative, Dr. Emma Hayes, as they cut the ribbon on the new facility. Behind them stretched a wall of photographs documenting the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. Images of Guardian and Lily together, of the bear's reunion with her cubs, of generations of descendants displaying increasingly complex social behaviors. When I was a child, Lily told the assembled crowd, I believed Guardian saved me because she was kind. As a young scientist, I theorized she saved me because she had lost her cubs, and her maternal instincts were misdirected. In my middle years, I understood that both were true, that instinct and emotion are not separate, but interwoven, in bears as in humans. She glanced at Emma, who had grown from a determined teenager into a brilliant researcher now leading her own studies on bear communication. And now, in the wisdom of my later years, I've come to believe something else entirely. That Guardian and I found each other precisely when we both needed healing, and in that mutual need, we created something neither of us could have created alone, a bridge between worlds. As if in response to her words, a soft murmur ran through the crowd. From the forest edge emerged a remarkable sight, a procession of bears, led by an elderly female with graying fur around her muzzle, Guardian's last surviving cub. Behind her came younger bears of various ages, moving with purposeful dignity along the boundary that separated the human gathering from their wild domain. They did not approach closely, maintaining the respectful distance that had characterized their interactions with humans for generations, but their presence was unmistakably deliberate. A recognition of the occasion, a confirmation of the connection that had been established 3 decades earlier. Researchers reached for cameras and notepads, documenting this unprecedented behavior with professional excitement. But for Lily, the moment transcended scientific observation. It was a completion of sorts, a final affirmation that what she and Guardian had begun had grown into something enduring and meaningful. As the bears watched from their side of the boundary, Lily completed her speech with words that would be inscribed on the wall of the new research center. Guardian taught us that the greatest scientific discoveries often begin not with a hypothesis, but with an act of compassion. She showed us that the boundaries between species are not walls, but membranes, permeable, flexible, allowing connection without erasing difference. In honoring her legacy, we commit ourselves not just to understanding the natural world, but to recognizing our place within it, not as conquerors or even stewards, but as relatives, different in form and function but connected by the same fundamental capacity for empathy that once led a mother bear to protect a human child, and that now leads us to protect her descendants and the wilderness they call home. That evening, as darkness fell over the sanctuary, visitors and researchers alike were treated to a rare symphony, the family chorus of Guardian's descendants, their voices rising and falling in complex patterns that scientists were still working to decode. But for those who had been touched by the story of Lily and Guardian, no translation was necessary. The message, carried on the night air across the permeable boundary between wilderness and civilization, was one that could be felt rather than understood, a reminder that in a world increasingly divided, connection remains possible across the greatest of differences, that compassion can build bridges stronger than any wall, and that sometimes the most profound truths can be discovered in the tears that come when we witness love in its purest, most unexpected forms.